Preparation for the United Nations Association's Test of English.
Continuing from the last time, this is question number 6 of the expression series that can be used as it is, in essays and interviews. Question: the recent U.S. presidential election has affected many leaders of global politics in different ways. Some observers fear that the transition from the incumbent administration to the new administration could be a rocky and time-consuming process. In any case, who do you think is smiling and crying over its results?
Dr. Cape has drafted 26 sample answers. This time, we will introduce the second 13 of the 26 patterns. It briefly summarizes the relationship of American politics with countries around the world, including international institutions. We hope you find it useful for your exam preparation. Let's quickly take a look at the list of 13 patterns. 14, Jamaica. 15, Japan. 16, North Korea. 17, South Korea. 18, Mexico. 19, NATO. 20, Russia. 21, Saudi Arabia. 22, Slovenia. 23, South Africa. 24, Taiwan. 25, TPP. 26, UN. I hope you find an answer that matches your opinion. Now let's read them together. 14. Jamaica. While Vice President-elect Harris' mother was Indian, her father is Jamaican in birth, sparking joy in the Caribbean country over her victory.
15. Japan. Historically, Japan's prime ministers have built close personal ties with Republic Party presidents, as seen in the Reagan-Nakasone, Bush Jr. Koizumi, and Trump Abe pairs. Indeed, Mr. Trump has probably found Japanese Minister Abe as the closest and personal ally, underlining the historical emphasis on the bilateral security treaty with the US. Japan's political leaders, including Mr. Abe, have been raising the payment of protection rackets for the country's security. Japan's new Prime Minister, Suga, may find it difficult to persuade the Biden administration to accept the commitment toward East Asian security as much as the previous administration.
16. North Korea. Incumbent presidential Trump's defeat at the election for the second term must have disappointed North Korean leader Kim Jong-un, as the personalized U.S.-North Korean relations have guaranteed, at minimum, his regime's immediate survival. Perhaps, the North Korean leader will hold a wait-and-see position toward the new U.S. administration, which is not likely to consider the diplomatic normalization with North Korea to be a high-priority issue.
17. South Korea. The country takes it that the bilateral security treaty with the U.S. has been an essential element of the country's survival, as well as the eventual unification with the North. South Korean President Moon Jae-in probably questions whether the Biden administration will be eager to get engaged in the diplomatic efforts for achieving Korean denuclearization and unification.
18. Mexico. Canada's sentiment of relief with the result of the U.S. presidential election may be magnified in Mexico. The way of Trump's treating Mexico in bilateral relations, particularly that related to constructing the border wall, was extremely undiplomatic. At least, Mexican diplomats probably feel that the country's bilateral relations with the U.S. under the Biden administration will be less one-sided and more civil and predictable.
19. NATO. President Trump has always demanded that other NATO members pay their fair share, and even hinted at the U.S. withdrawal from the multilateral security organization. Clearly, President Biden will retain the historic arrangement with European allies, although the country is likely to request for greater contributions from its allies.
20. Russia. Recent European public opinion surveys showed that, among Europeans, the Russians have the most positive views towards President Trump, who has seldom criticized Russia or its president, Vladimir Putin. Many Americans have suspected that Russia interfered in the 2016 presidential election. Given the fact that Mr. Biden has been a vocal critic of Moscow and recently identified Russia as the biggest threat to the U.S., many Russians are not particularly excited about Biden's electoral victory.
21. Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia has been happy with President Trump, whose Middle East policies and opposition to Iran boosted the country's relations with the US. However, the two countries, particularly under the Biden administration, are likely to clash over the pending lawsuit of Jamal Khashoggi, a Saudi journalist in political exile in the US. It is well documented that this journalist, with a critical view towards the kingdom, was killed by a team of the country's agents during a visit to the Saudi consulate in Istanbul, Turkey in October 2018. Reportedly, the objective of the murder was to halt Khashoggi's human rights advocacy in the US for democratic reforms in the Arab world.
22. Slovenia. The country has been supportive of the Trump presidency, as the First Lady was from the country. As the support toward Trump is not much politically motivated, the disappointment resulting of Trump's defeat in the 2020 election may not be so strong and long-lasting.
23. South Africa. Perhaps the US, being physically far away, has historically influenced South Africa, in a limited extent. However, the recent explosive rise of racial tension in the US has widely reported throughout the world and induced much negative impression of the Trump administration to many South Africans who used to suffer from their own institutionalized racism, apartheid, for a long period. The Biden-Harris ticket, with a mixture of gender, race, ethnicity and policy orientations, therefore, must comfort many South Africans.
24. Taiwan. Taiwan has developed close relations, including trade of high-tech military equipment, with the US, under the Trump administration. Indeed, President Trump has indicated the readiness and willingness of the country to acknowledge Taiwan as an independent state, and the US Congress has strengthened its bipartisan legislative actions to formalize diplomatic relations with Taiwan and help Taiwan's membership in international organizations such as the IMF and the WHO. The Taiwanese are perhaps more supportive of Trump than Biden, because of the former's hawkish stance toward China. The official stance of the Taiwanese government is neutral. Nevertheless, it could be seen that the Biden administration's likelihood of being strongly supportive toward Hong Kong's pro-democracy movement may be applicable to the recognition of Taiwan's independence.
25. TPP. The TPP, Trans-Pacific Partnership, was the centerpiece of the Obama administration's pivot, a shorthand expression of a successful policy initiative to incorporate 11 Pacific Rim countries, including Japan, Australia, and New Zealand, but not China or India, into the world's largest free trade pact. During the 2016 presidential campaign, Trump expressed his objection to the 2015 partnership agreement. In fact, President Trump's first major policy action, following the inauguration in January 2017, was the announcement of the U.S. leaving the agreement. While it is unclear as to how soon it will happen, many of the remaining TPP members must anticipate that the Biden administration will bring the U.S. back to the agreement in due course.
26. UN. U.S. President Trump has often been critical toward multilateralism, and in this regard, the UN is by and large one of the least favored institutions in his view. Since 2017, the Trump administration has withdrawn from some of the important UN-sponsored multilateral agreements, such as the Paris Agreement on Climate Change, as well as international institutions, such as the UN Human Rights Council. Most recently, President Trump has announced the U.S. intention of withdrawal from the WHO. Thus, many international civil service people may find that the express intention by President-elect Biden to return to some of these organizations is heartening. It is hard to imagine, however, to envisage that the U.S. will full-heartedly return to the UN, thereby treating it as the central venue for its foreign policy. We have provided 26 sample answers on the impact of Mr. Biden's victory on the world. Did you enjoy it? The number of people infected with corona continues to increase, and the future is uncertain, but there is no choice but to prevent it properly without being too afraid. I sincerely hope that the infected will recover as soon as possible and regain their daily lives.
Thank you for watching. Have a good day. Cheers.